everybody. My name is Jenna, and today I wanted to share 5 of my quilty New Year's goals with you. And I hope that as I share mine, I hope they inspire you to try something new this New Year's. First, we're getting scrappy with our quilts. Like you, I have lots and lots of scraps at home. I just cleaned out my scrap bins this last weekend, and they are just overflowing. And I love a good scrappy quilt, but sometimes I forget to use all my scraps. And so here are some ways this New Year's I want to use a lot of my scraps. One, I want to do some smaller projects with my scraps, and I feel like that will use them a lot faster. So doing something like a quilted coaster. This is a coaster I made a few years ago using scraps from a quilted coat, and then the binding is scraps from another quilt that I didn't have enough binding to bind a whole nother quilt. This was something perfect, so maybe making more quilted coasters to put around the house or use as gifts. Another thing I like to do with scraps is do a quilted wall hanging. This is a wall hanging that I did this last year with a whole bunch of scraps, and when I did this wall hanging, I also wanted to try a new technique out, and so I hand quilted this entire thing just to practice my hand quilting skills, and I love how it turned out. This was all scraps except for the black going around each of those. I used a little fat quarter that I had, but otherwise scraps. It was perfect. Another way I want to use my scraps is by doing a bunch of little bags. I feel like making like little makeup bags, toiletry bags are super easy. They make great gifts, and they use up, again, a decent amount of scraps. And I think by making smaller projects with your scraps, you're making projects a lot faster. You feel like you're getting rid of your stash just a little bit quicker than you would if you made a whole quilt. And I just love the look of the smaller projects. If you're like me and have way too many scraps, that making a bunch of small projects won't even put a dent in your scrap bin, you can make some large, fun quilt, super colorful quilt. This year, I really want to make a scrappy color wheel-like quilt that really plays with color theory. There is one quilt pattern. It's called the Peanut Butter Quilt by Then Came June. It's a free pattern. There are several variations of it that are super fun and scrappy that really play with color. There is one by quilter Allison Ramsing that I think is absolutely gorgeous. She has the yellow cornerstone blocks to tie everything together, and then her big squares in the center. The color just flows so beautifully. Oh my gosh, it is one of my favorites. And then in the opposite way with that same quilt, making your white block, your big center block, and then having the little squares or the little rectangles surrounding that block do your fun color randomness. I think that would be really fun. Another quilt that I would love to do with scraps is a half square triangle-y type quilt. It's not a half square triangle, but you use strips and you sew it just on a scrap piece of paper or a scrap piece of fabric, and then you cut them down to your squares, and you can orient these blocks in different ways to create little diamonds. I think playing with color theory that way, you can do it really scrappy with color, or you can go from like reds to blues to yellows to like, you can do the color wheel, you can do whatever you want with them. I think that would be really fun. Again, on the line of scraps, there is another quilt. It's called the Plaidish Quilt by Kitchen Table Quilting that is so fun, where you can do random colors everywhere with your scraps, or you can play around with the placement of your color that I think would be absolutely gorgeous. And those are the 2 main ways I want to use scraps this year. Smaller project and doing one like really fun, big, scrappy quilt. My second goal of this New Year's is to use my fun random rulers that I don't normally go towards. For example, I have these triangle diamond rulers. So we have the 60-degree triangle, we have a 90-degree triangle, and then we have this kite ruler. I want to figure out how to use these and make a really fun quilt with them. I know I've seen people do stuff before with them. For example, with the 60-degree triangle quilt, I've seen people do just different triangles and orient them different ways to sew them together into a giant quilt. And I think that is a fun, easy way to use this. When I was doing some research, I found this quilt by Quilty Love that I thought was absolutely gorgeous, and doing something like that with my 60-degree triangle ruler. Another way you can use them is by sewing a bunch of 2-inch strips together and cutting out your triangles and then orient them in different ways. Pattern writer Tiffany Hayes has a couple of quilts that use the 60-degree triangle ruler that are absolutely stunning. Then with this kite ruler, I really had no clue what to do with it, so I did some research and I found this quilt by Just So Happy NC that it looks like it could be a tree skirt of some sort or a wall hanging. Being inspired by this work of art, doing my own thing with it, especially with more modern fabrics, would be a goal for this New Year's, especially with this. And then with this right square triangle, I just want to figure out more ways to use it. And I'll let you know this upcoming year what I figure out with this guy. My third goal for this New Year's is to try out new techniques that I have been intimidated by in the past, or I just have gotten so in my ways that I didn't feel the need to step out of my little quilty bubble. One of those techniques is doing a Lone Star quilt. In fact, like 5 years ago, I bought the pattern for a Lone Star quilt. I cut out a bunch of 2.5-inch strips for it. I started sewing those strips together, and then I got to cutting them and I got a little bit overwhelmed, and so I stopped. I want to revisit that this year and see if I can finish that quilt. And the reason I think a Lone Star quilt intimidates me is because when you cut the pieces, they're cut at an angle, and so when you go to sew them together, if you match up the seams perfectly, they're gonna be off. I know that's weird to say out loud and you're thinking, wait, they're gonna be off? But they are. Figuring out how to get those seams where your seams line up perfectly. I am a stickler for my seams lining up. I don't know why, it just is the way it is. I wish I was more like the people who were happy with their seams not lining up, because I know that no one else notices it but me. But I want to figure out how to get those seams to line up, especially on a Lone Star quilt, and I know it will be easier than I'm making it out to be. But I'm a better quilter now than I was 5 years ago, so I know I can do that. Another technique I want to get better at and to learn is how to do a Y seam and not be afraid of them. I've seen lots of quilts with different Y seams, and they intimidate me. But I've done Y-ish seams on bags in the past, and so why can't I do it on a quilt? Like, I'll be able to do it on a quilt. So I was thinking about starting with the Lemoyne Star, possibly, because there are some Y seams in that. I know you can make it without a Y seam, but purposely doing like a Lemoyne Star or a star block of some kind. If there's a technique that y'all would want to try this year, please put it down in the comments so maybe I can make a video on it later, or if it's a technique I haven't even thought about, maybe I should try it too. My fourth quilting goal for this New Year's is to get better at automated quilting and to step out of my comfort zone a little bit. I have Quilter's Creative Touch 6 from Grace Company, and I have the Pro version with the Gold Card extension. And there is so much you can do with it, but I tend to do the same thing over and over. I tend to do an edge-to-edge design over the entire quilt, and I want to step out of my comfort zone and do a little bit more specialized quilting using it. And one thing I want to do with it is practice my borders and corners. I made this Halloween quilt a couple years ago, and there is a nice border on it. And the reason I haven't finished this quilt after several years, even though I have the automation system at home, is because I know I wanted to do something a little bit more specialized. In my head, I wanted to do more free motion quilting, but I think doing a mixture of free motion with automation, especially for these borders and corners, I think that is one thing I want to learn because I've never done borders and corners before. And with QCT6, because I tend to do a lot more edge-to-edge pantographs, I want to try to do more block placement things and maybe combine different blocks or different pantographs. This is a quilt I did, I think like 3 years ago, and it is a Joan of Arc foundation paper piecing. This quilt was at the time the hardest quilt I had ever done because it was all foundation paper pieced. And I have not quilted it yet because I am so afraid to ruin it. This took so much time, it cost a lot of money. The quilting, like quilters know, the quilting can really make or break a quilt. And so figuring out how to use automation combined with free motion quilting for this quilt so that I can finally say it's finished would be really nice, but I'm so afraid of touching it and ruining it. So part of me wants to just give it to someone else and then we'll be good because I'm so critical of myself, but I think I can do it. I can definitely do it. Another one of the gold card features is the font stitcher, which is really nice to put names or personalization onto quilts. And I have yet to do that. And so I think trying to personalize a quilt in a different way using font stitcher would be fun, or using it to not make a quilt, but I have a little nephew who is turning 1. By the time this video comes out, he will be 1. And I want to make the alphabet for him. And so using font stitcher to stitch out the entire alphabet, and then I can take some pinking shears and cut around it so that he can have that tactile letter to play with and to learn from. I think that would be super fun. In general, I think there's so much to do with QCT6, and I just want to dive into it and learn it and step out of my comfort zone when it comes to automated quilting. And my 5th and final goal for this New Year's is to finish my whips, my UFOs, my work in progresses. I had a friend a few months ago, by a few months, probably like 9 months ago, say, Jenna, do you have whips? Because I feel like I don't, because when I get into one, I just go until it's finished. And I agreed with her and I said, yeah, I feel like I'm the same way. I start a project and I'll just go until it's done. And then this year has gotten so busy and chaotic for me that I've been able to start a lot of projects, but there's some I haven't finished that this year I really want to finish. One of the whips I want to finish, which I mentioned earlier, is my Lone Star quilt whip. You can see I have some of the guys made. I think this is like literally the only one because I did this and my points didn't line up the way I wanted them to, and so I stopped. So I have some of them cut out, but most of this has barely been started, so doing this Lone Star quilt is one of my goals to finish this particular whip. Another whip I want to finish is my It's a Small World quilt. This is the Ode to Mary Blair quilt by Corinne Sovey. And when I taught elementary school, one of my favorite lessons every single year to teach was we would read A Pocket Full of Color, which was all about Mary Blair, who was one of the first women artists who brought color to Disney. She helped illustrate Alice in Wonderland, Cinderella. She designed the It's a Small World ride, so this is a quilt, kind of an ode to her. And it's a lot of applique. It's a sampler quilt, so you have foundation paper piecing, traditional piecing, applique, and I feel like it's just taking me forever. And so finishing this quilt is one of my goals. I think would be absolutely beautiful when it's finished. And the final quilt I want to work on is my English paper piecing quilt. This is one that I really only work on plains, but I want to start doing a little bit more with it. Look how cute this is. This is all hand quilting. This pattern is, I think it's the Ice Cream Soda quilt by Tales of a Cloth. I have a bunch of pieces cut out, in progress being sewn. I have more pieces at home cut out being sewn, but there are 80 blocks in this quilt, and I think I have 15-ish done. So I really just want to get a head start on this and at least get the blocks done. Maybe not sew them all together, but get the blocks done this year. I definitely have a few more whips at home, but I only brought these ones. Tell me about what some of your goals for this year are, because I know I just said 5 today, but as the year goes on, I probably will have more goals. For example, another one is not buying any fabric and only using what's in my stash. I think we all have that goal. Do we ever hold up to that goal is the question of the day. So far, I have held up to that goal, and I've had this goal since October of this past year, and I have not bought any new fabric, except if it's for work. I'll buy it for work. But for my personal projects, no. There are just so many things I want to do this New Year's. Do you have similar goals to me? Are they different? Make sure to put the goals that you have in the comments. And if you want to come along with me in my little quilting journey to complete these goals, make sure to like and subscribe and to click that bell button so you get some notifications. We drop new videos every Wednesday and Friday. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time.